Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we're going to talk about some of the absolute worst the worst Dungeons & Dragons commentary advice that you could possibly give in 2021. It's always been bad advice, okay? But today it is worse than ever and far more, and it's advice that's worse than useless, right? I really feel like it actively does damage. And that advice is talk to your players. So first of all, a viewer and commenter said this. Like, I asked for advice online on a problem, and they said, talk to your players, right? And first of all, I don't respond to talk to your players well anymore. It's triggering for me. It just makes me curl up in a fetal ball and remember the advice of 100 milquetoast Dungeons and Dragons commentators. I like Ginny D, but I think she's actively said this, that she recognizes her channel is essentially talk to your players on loop, interrupted occasionally by cosplay, right? Like, there are so many Dungeons and Dragons commentators that say talk to your players absolutely constantly. Ginny D actually acknowledged it in a video. She was like, I know I've been saying this like 1,000 times, right? Because it's so repetitive, right? So it is talk to your players is triggering language for me, right? And it's just so upsetting because you just have to put your brain in a jar to think talk to your players was ever good advice. And the fact that it is today, you really have to be shutting down your brain mechanism to think talk to your players is good advice ever for any dungeon master to solve a Dungeons & Dragons problem, okay? So first of all, let's talk about the reasons you should never say talk to your players, okay? When you're giving advice for dungeon mastering, okay? The biggest reason is it's already been said 1,000,000 times. It is the most echoed phrase that it has become meaningless. Here's a good example. If you're ever in a verbal altercation, right, where you're like, there's a lot of friction, right, and you want somebody to relax, right, and just like not stop being strained. One of the worst things you can say is relax. The word relax is like the opposite of relaxing. When you tell someone to relax, they often will not. And I think talk to your players, it's such bad advice for so many reasons. So one, if no Dungeons & Dragons commentator ever says the words talk to your players again, it'll be fine because it's already been said 10,000 times at least by the gaggle of milquetoast Dungeons & Dragons commentators out there that just, kind of spout it out like parrots, right? Like, so it's been said enough, for goodness sake. Second, okay, here's the issue. Talk to your players only works if you have shallow players, okay? We live in a fundamentally different world today. And I know this is the deep end of the pool, but follow me here, okay? If you don't know this yet, listen to this reality. This world never rewarded transparency. It punishes transparency. Data is power. Information is power. Knowing is power, okay? And the reality is only the most basic people get asked a question, and then give the real truth, right? How do we know this? Well, one, if you weren't paying attention, what do you think happened in 2016, right? Literally 1,000 plus pollsters went out and asked millions of people, who are you going to vote for, right? And a ton of people lied to their face about a shockingly important question, so much so that most political analysts and political pundits were calling the election for Hillary Clinton, right? And if you are sitting in 2021 and you don't realize that the vast majority will very frequently lie to someone when they're asked a very direct, simple question, then you're not paying attention. This world absolutely punishes transparency. It doesn't reward it. We would all like to believe that this world rewards transparency, but it does not. And the most powerful people in the world, they are retaining power and building power by making sure that the information that is given out when questions are answered is the information they want given out, not necessarily the truth, right? And so only the most basic people with no agenda and no goals will ever give you a straight answer when you ask a question, okay? And you need to understand, guess what? Not a lot of basic people play Dungeons and Dragons. The people who play Dungeons and Dragons are coming there because they want to experience unbound identity and unbound immersion. These are the deep end of the pool when it comes to intellectuals, charismatic, people who are charismatic and people who are confident. The people who play Dungeons and Dragons are intelligent, charismatic, and confident, and highly educated at the macro level, at the 51% level. And they definitely understand that when they're asked a question, their answer has value. And there are very, very distinct reasons why when you ask someone a straight answer, you very well may not receive the truth. It's very important for you to understand that today, right? And just so you're aware, when you hear some Dungeons and Dragons commentator spouting off nonsense such as talk to your players, they are layering that advice on shockingly bad assumptions, right? Here's the assumption. Everybody at the table is incented to tell each other the truth and to ask clear questions and to give clear answers. And the reality is that is so utterly basic and so primitive in modern games, right? And the reason why is you don't know why I am convinced you don't actually know why most of the people who are playing at your Dungeons and Dragons games are there. They can be there for a host of reasons, right? And when you ask them questions like, oh, did you like the game? Are they going to be rude and say no, right? Or, hey, Sally, do you want to play the cleric? Because we're short a cleric, right? Do you understand how stilted and how, packed that question is? And how trapped those people are, right? So you're assuming that the questions don't contain bias and agenda and are not misaligned with the player's goals. You are also assuming that player will give you truth at most of at 51% level, which very well may not be true. There are a host of reasons why complex, charismatic, intelligent, layered people will not give truth to questions that are answered. And the reason why is today, more than ever, okay, we have progressed as a species, and we no longer are, thank goodness, we're turning away from the stick and the sword and the long iron. That's not where the battles are at. The battles are at the point of language. And guess what questions are? Questions are tools. They show weakness. And actually, if they're not used well, they actually can damage the people who use them. Questions show weakness. They show strength, right? Questions can be directions, right? Questions can be insults. Questions can be compliments. Questions can be a whole host of things. And so it is the most basic, shallow people who ask questions and expect truth back, right? Yes, the world used to work that way, but we are at the top of Maslow's hierarchy now. It's all art, baby. We're in a different zone. We're not scrabbling for food and shelter anymore, right? We're not scrabbling for security. There's never been a boot on the ground in America, right? We are in a new space, and the new battleground is language. And so only people who fundamentally don't understand the complexity of modern Dungeons and Dragons players would ever say something as foolish, as shallow, as simple as talk to your players, right? It is a fallacy layered on false assumptions and shockingly bad understanding of a new reality when it comes to transparency, right? Power is information. Transparency, we live in a world where transparency is punished, not rewarded. And I understand these are hard truths, right? And, and the only reason I say it here is I think I am building I'm building a community who thinks about Dungeons and Dragons in a different way. And for us, we can't trade on the old, shallow fallacies. We just can't. We don't have time for it. We got goals to create. It could, I want Dungeons and Dragons to be more broadly known and more widely played than Fortnite. I ain't got time for ridiculous statements such as talk to your players, right? Which is built on a 30-year-old idea that someone asks a question and then and you ask a question and they give you truth for nothing, for free, right? That information isn't valuable. That information is just to be given away for someone else's words, right? If you don't understand that the world has been completely reshaped, and we know this for a fact from what happened in 2016, and that at the macro level, the public absolutely will give an answer that is shockingly different than the truth. I mean, if those metrics aren't there to convince you enough, again, just start looking around. Realize transparency is not rewarded in this world. It is punished. And the idea, and talk to your players was always shallow, simple, was always a shallow, simple fallacy. And today it is more hollow and worthless than ever. That's my opinion. I'm willing to hear yours. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.